they started knowing about the terminal nature of their disease on day one. I mean, Austin was 3. I mean, you talk about it in an age-appropriate way, but we started familiarizing them with wheelchairs, having them around kids with vents. I mean, I remember Austin, I sent him to summer camp when he was 7, and there were adults at this camp with ventilators, and he came home and said, they have Duchenne, I have Duchenne. And I said, yep, aren't they awesome human beings? And one day you'll have some special mechanics to help you breathe. And so we talked about it from day one, and the last thing you want is your kids Googling what happens when you have Duchenne. I mean, I've seen this, and Austin says it now. It's nice to hear that he likes the way he was raised, because, it could go any way, right? But, he will say things. He was just on a panel not too long ago, and he was like, I have a shortened lifespan, and I've known that my whole life, and I think that made me live my life way differently than I would have. Like, everybody should live that way. And so, we started talking about it. I mean, I never sat them down, but you make it normal. It's just this normalization. Interesting fact, James thought he was going to get a wheelchair at some point. And I remember he was probably 2 or 3, and he asked when his chair was coming. And so to him, he thought you reached a certain age and you got a wheelchair. And so I just remember that being like, I never told him he wouldn't. And so I think if you put that combination together, I love my children, but everything is finite. Everything, the whole world is finite. You never know what's going to happen. And so if you put that hat on where you're like, I'm just going to go forward, full steam ahead. I'm going to hope that really smart people who are smarter than I am figure things out. And I'm going to do my best to support them, and I think that there are certainly periods of time, sometimes I'll look at Austin and go, I'm really going to miss this kid. But I'm also like, he's kind of a pain in the ass. And, we live our lives. Like, I don't just look at him and stare at him all the time and think he's dying. I've raised my kids to just be so normal that we don't really, it doesn't really affect us so much anymore. And this, it's the same thing, just coming back to like sort of this medical family. It's so normal for us to be in this medical world at this point that we take for granted that, that other people understand it. For example, Nora's one of her first words other than mama, dada was vitals. And so she was standing, holding on to an IV pole, because that's how she learned to walk, is with an IV pole up and down the research hallway. She was raised in clinical trials. She's 8. Max has been on drug 8 years. She was 6 months when she started going on these trips to Columbus. And so the nurses practically raised her. She can hang out with anybody at this point, but she's running up and down the hall, and the nurse said, time for vitals, Max. And Nora goes, vitals! And we were like, all righty then, first word. It's great. So, we just kind of do our thing. And it's interesting that when James was diagnosed with immune deficiency, I kind of came home and I'm just like, all right, if any family is going to deal with this, it is totally us. Like, we already have a whole closet dedicated to infusion supplies. We can make another drawer. I slapped his name on it, and now we have a third.